Greetings and welcome, everyone. Welcome to episode 62 of the Lott Carey Wise Digital Couch. My name is Doria Larrier, and I am the host for this show. This is episode 62, and the title is Exclusion Is Exploitation. This is part two of our series on the voice of women preachers and how they speak truth, break silence, and claim the pulpit. The first episode that we had was in March, and we heard from three brothers who are leaders in our pulpits, Dr. Leah, Dr. Scott, as well as Dr. Willie Dwayne Francois III, and they spoke from their perspective of men who have expanded the pulpit to include women's voices and made forays into those spaces. And this month we will focus on women preachers who do that work. On behalf of the Executive Secretary Treasurer of our Lott Carey Leadership, Reverend Emmett Dunn, our first Vice President, Dr. Jessie Williams, our second Vice President, Dr. James Victor, our President, Dr. Jessie Williams, our first Vice President, Dr. James Victor, our second Vice President, Dr. Robert Scott, as well as our Lott Carey Wise Leadership, Dr. Brendan McBurrow, who is our President, Sister Lynette Richardson, who is our first Vice President, and Minister Brenda Troy, who is our second Vice President, our team leader for Men on Missions, Charles Monterio, and Minister Stephen Edmonds, who is our youth department leader. We welcome you all. Please make sure to let us know where you are watching us from, your church and your pastor. Let us know who is seeing this, and we would be so glad to shout you out. This evening is going to be slightly different. Because this is Holy Week in our Baptist spaces, there are a number of other services that people are attending. And so you will actually see two pre-recorded conversations with myself and our guests for this evening. And so the first video you will see, but I am live and I'll be moderating the chat. So I do look forward to hearing your comments and participating in the conversation with you. So please drop them on the YouTube side and we'll be able to interact with you. The first part of the conversation will be with two of our guests, and that includes Bishop Leah Daughtry, who's the presiding prelate of the House of the Lord Church, as well as Dr. Gabby Cudjoe Wilkes, who is the co-pastor of Double Love Experience. They are both in Brooklyn, New York. The second part of the conversation will be with Reverend Tisha Dixon-Williams, who is the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton. So hear ye them. Yes, and that is Bishop Leah Daughtry and Pastor Gabby Cudjoe Wilkes. They are both respected individuals in their places and spaces. And if you do not know them before, you will definitely know them in a variety of ways during this conversation. Let's begin with our first question. The question is about calling versus containment. So you were called by God, but also often constrained by the church. How have you navigated the tension from the pew to the pulpit between divine calling and institutional limitation without allowing your voice to be shrunken?
Well, I'll start. This is always a challenging question for me because I grew up in a denomination that did not observe differences in gender when it came to ministry. So I didn't actually realize that this was a problem until I got to seminary. In our church, I was surrounded by women deacons and women pastors and women bishops. So it just didn't occur to me that this was an issue until I got to seminary and I listened to some of my sister students talking about their aspirations to pastor or to lead and the challenges that they were having in their denominations, and I just said, what do you mean? I just, it was not my experience. And so I came to understand, and to, as I listened to them, some of the challenges that they were experiencing. And so I became more attuned to it in my own life and in the work that I chose to do. And my question for them always was, why do you stay there? And why do you stay in a place that won't accept your gifts? And why don't you go somewhere that loves God enough to honor God's call on your life? And so I still struggle with that, because now I'm the presiding bishop of our denomination, and I'm not the first woman in our denomination. Our first female presider was in 1952. So it wasn't, so I still struggle with that when I hear my sisters talking about it. And I always want to push them to go where your gifts can be accepted, go where your gifts will be honored, go where you can do the work that God has called you to do. God didn't call you with a lid. So why are we allowing other folks to put lids on God's calling on our lives?
Ooh, I love that, Bishop. That was so powerful. Thank you so much for having us, Doriel. And I will say, so I locate myself as a third generation Black woman preacher because my mother is a retired minister. She received her credentials in the AME church and then ultimately served the AME church for 20 plus years and then retired as a UMC minister. She's retired now. My sister is a Gen X minister. And I'm a millennial minister. And so, even though my sister and I are siblings, we are of two generations. And that does show up in the different affordances we've had in ministry, just as time has continued to unleash some more doors and more women have been knocking down more doors, right? So, I say that to say I have a very unique positionality here as well. Similar to Bishop, I did not originally grow up seeing any challenges with women clergy because I spent the first 9.5 years of my life on the East Coast. I was living in Massachusetts. My mother comes out of St. Paul A&B Church in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And she was on staff before I was in her womb while she was on staff, and it was no problem. We then relocated to Texas. My mother was the first woman uh, chaplain of Paul Quinn College and HBCU in Dallas, Texas. It was not until I got to Texas where I saw how ugly sexism is in the pulpit. I literally had classmates telling me in school, your mom can't be a preacher. God doesn't allow women preachers. What? I literally had experiences where I saw males, Black men, block my mother from being in pulpits, and the stories go on for days. And so it was jarring for me to go from such a place of freedom where it wasn't even a conversation, to Bishop's point, to then seeing the literal gender oppression. Even as she was able to rise, it was always met with critique. And so, but I love Bishop's statement just now about, not being contained, right? I saw my mother still exercise her spiritual gifts, even with that limitation in Texas. And I do ministry in New York. And so I fight different battles, but thankfully not the gender battle as explicitly. Where I've had a really interesting journey with gender is that I happen to be married to a male pastor. And I tell people all the time, we are both called, we both got trained. We just so happen to be married, so we do it together, right? But people have expectations and boxes for what couples might do in ministry, who is the actual pastor and who's not. And we have a co leadership model where anybody who's been to our church understands that we carry that out and carry it through, that both of us are the pastors of our church. And so that has been disruptive and interesting because I found that even folks who appreciate a co-pastor model seem to only appreciate it if the woman is second in command and the final say is only being done by the male. When they realize that's not how we function in my church, for some folks, it's very jarring, it's very disruptive. And so the way that I stay outside of the container and don't allow it to be contained, I follow the tradition my mother has set for me that I've seen all my life, which is you need to be aware of what's going on around you. You need to be aware of whatever oppression might be there because of your gender, but you've got to do what God's called you to do anyway. And one thing that I'm really proud of is the way that my husband and I move in ministry. Many have told us at first it was jarring to them, and then down the line, it became instructive for them. It helped them be a little bit kinder to other clergy couples. It helped them slow their assumptions, and so forth and so on. And so I just try to be authentic and consistent, but I am not oblivious to the fact that I have inherited some privileges that generations before me, women in ministry, have fought to knock down.
Thank you for that. The conversation about being contained and having, for you, Pastor Cudjoe Wilkes, having the opportunity to have your mother and other people in your family and even the church that you were raised in. Similarly with you, Bishop Daughtry, of having a community that didn't shy away from that and actually, supported and promoted that. Those are unique situations. And then, Pastor Gabby, when you said you left Massachusetts and you went to the South, literally going from one side of the coin to the other of acceptance and promotion to almost abhorrence, and devastation, like how in the world and we're going to block. What did that feel like in terms of your response to keep going forward? Because for some people, if they're brand new to that, they may say, oh yeah, I guess I was stepping out of the box. But in essence, both of you were in boxes that was a warm reminder of who you really are and who you should be. So to people who are not familiar with that collegiality, what was able to keep you moving forward, even though people around you who are new to that thought were thinking, I don't really know why you're here. Like, what kept you going?
I think it's important not to have your entire identity wrapped up in the fact that you are a woman preacher or a woman clergy person. Like, if that was my be all, end all way that I moved through the world, I probably would have been crushed a long time ago. Because what I have found is that you are always captive to somebody else's imagination of what a minister should be. And so even if you're in a quote unquote affirming space where on paper they believe in women clergy, you still gonna get mother so-and-so who wants a male pastor at the bedside when she's sick. You still gonna get brother and sister so-and-so who, you cool to key within the hallway, but you're not gonna officiate their wedding or christen their baby. Like, you still gonna have people's assumptions. And so I think for me, at Double Love, at this point, we have ordained 5 women clergy, and I have 1 in training now, right? So it's an interesting paradigm where just like the clergy that have come to us have been women. And each of them, I tell them both sides of this spectrum so they won't be surprised. But I always tell them, but don't let it be an excuse for you not to do what God is calling you to. But it does give us the ability to choose. Like Bishop said, you can do ministry anywhere. So in some places that are continually oppressive in ways that it literally attacks your own self-worth and self-being, I go with Bishop. You might need to find another place to do your ministry work. Some are called to stay on the wall and be that change, but I think we have to be attentive to the spaces that we're in, and not let our identity only be in people who call us to preach or provide pastoral care, because that can really mess with your psyche.
Yeah, I don't know that I have much to add to that. I think for me, it underscores the importance for women before they even get to ministry, how important it is for us to affirm the skills, the abilities, the talents of girls as they are growing up. Because when you grow up in an environment where you're affirmed, where your leadership is affirmed, where your talents are affirmed, then moving into ministry, even if you come up against the barriers, you've already been surrounded by that idea that I bring something to the table. I bring my talents. I bring the gifts that God gave me to this table. So you don't have to like it because I've already, whoever it was that surrounded you has already poured into you and affirmed your value. And so I think we've got to understand the continuum. We didn't wake up one day and we're clergy, right? There's something in the way that we acculturated that allows us to move in a, or to respond in a different kind of way, or in a particular kind of way. And I think women who grow up not having been affirmed may, it may respond to challenges differently. I'll give you an example. We were planning Rosa Parks' homegoing here in Washington. And when it came time for the program, I got drafted to be on the program because we needed another clergy, and the people who were co-planning with me said, bring you have to. Okay. So we go up to the pastor's office to sit and prepare. It was all men, and they ignored me. The other woman in the room was Miss Parks' pastor, and they ignored her. We went downstairs for the processional. Now, I'm a fifth generation pastor. I know how this works. They put Mrs. Parks' pastor in the front of the line. So we led the processional in. She said not a word. The other guest pastors did the sentences and the words. When we went to be seated in the pulpit, Mrs. Parks' pastor, who had been her pastor for 10 years, was seated on the lower podium, and I was seated on the lower podium, and all the men were seated on the upper podium. They let that woman read a scripture. She didn't get to pray, give remarks, and there's no one there see the inequity and the in this, and they're just okay with it. And how does 10 years? And I think if I was a different kind, I was mad for her. I was going back to my pulpit, and when we don't do all of that, but I was mad for her and the disrespect that I perceived that she was having to endure at the hands of some of the most well-known Black male clergy in the country. And although I was mad, and I did say something about it to one of them later, and he's like, I didn't even think about it. So how do we raise awareness? And sometimes that means being on the wall, but being the one on the wall that is sounding the alarm, and not being the one on the wall that's just watching. Those watchers are necessary, but sometimes you need to be the one with the horn saying, no, don't do this again. This isn't fair. It isn't right. It isn't equitable, and not on my watch.
Excellent. Excellent. And actually that brings us to our second question. And so at what point and how do we call people out? How do we do that with tact, but also with tenacity? And so let's move on to from survival to reformation. So you too, and our other guests will be in part of this conversation as well, as women who have broken barriers and shifted narratives. What must continue to change structurally and spiritually, so the next generation, but really some of the people who are still here now, can lead without having to fight the same battles. So prior to the second part of this question, you have definitely both spoken about being in the room because somebody else was in the room before you. But when you show up in spaces, and particularly, thank you very much for sharing this Rosa Parks, example, that you can be a helper, you can be on the sideline, you can, as you said, like maybe read a scripture, but you can't give remarks. As you said, Pastor Gabby, you can, and I'm just quoting you, you can kiki like in the hallway, but no, we need the real person to officiate the homegoing, or to bless the baby, or to bless it. Can't be a real marriage, or it can't, the person ain't really going home to be with the Lord if the female. And so how do you fix your face, as our parents would say, go, afterwards, tap them on the shoulder or pull them by the elbow a little bit and say, "Can I have a word with you?" How do you do that? How do you do that? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? Tactfully, so that you can, of course, maintain your name as well.
I think you said tactfully, and listen, this is where the Spirit has to lead you and guide you in how to deal with some of the brethren and sistren. Let's be honest.
Yes.
And for some, I think it's a calling out, but it's also a calling to, or calling forth to something higher. It's like, do you realize? And I've said this to some of my male friends recently. If you put out another flyer for another Holy Week service with all men, I'm gonna talk about you on Facebook.
I think I heard you say that too.
Yeah. Or don't it? If I see that, delete, and I will not be there, and I will not be sharing it, because how are you having 6 nights of service without including folks who represent what I'm going to just hazard a guess and say is the majority of your congregation? Come on, dude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them, they go, oh,
I didn't think about
it. On the best, and some of them will say, you know what, you're right. I didn't even think about it. And some of them will be like, well, the psalmist is a woman. Huh? No, that's not a good enough answer. But right. I think in the year of our Lord 2026,
in the 26, really, in the 26,
there is really no excuse. And so I don't personally, of course, now I'm older now, I don't feel the need to pussyfoot around with these folks. And if it was 1950, maybe, but at this point, you ought to know better. And so let me help you know better. If I have the relationship and the entree to say something, I'm going to say something. And I have. It's like, dude, what you doing? Come on now. And this is not about whether you invite me, because I don't care. But what are you showing to the world about who you are and what your ministry is representing? And to my brother clergy who happen to find themselves on the flyer, did you ask?
Yes. Where's the accountability?
Who else is on the program?
Where's the allyship?
Be an ally. Be an ally. I was on the I worked with this group in Paris one time, and we were on this it's called the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society. And in France, they had this men's movement that was called Not Without My Sisters. And in French, it was like never without her. And they agreed, this group of men, that they would not serve on boards of directors. They would not serve in leadership of organizations if there were no women. And it revolutionized the way that corporate folks in France had to think of it, because men were saying, no, not without her. What if we did that in the church with these Good Friday, these Holy Week services, and these other, platform things we do? Every say, and some of our brothers say, not without. I am not going to be on a program or a flyer that does not include the totality of God's people.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I just looked it up. It's jamais sans elle.
Yeah, jamais sans elle. Yeah.
Not without her. Oh, I love that. The question is, how do we call? Would you give me the question one more time?
Sure. So how do you call people out about that? How do you name it tactfully, but to pull someone's coattail, or what's the robe? What's the big fancy robe called? The robe, right? The hem of the garment. Oh, I like that. How do we pull the hem of the garment? Say, excuse me. Not that I'm the woman with the issue of blood, but I'm the woman with an issue.
Right.
How are we gonna do this?
So I think Bishop nailed it. And I think what I would add is we have to really, I think, assess what our end goal is when we call out. because I do believe in calling folks out to hold them to accountability. But I also believe we have to think about this culture that we're in social media, where everyone just wants to go viral. And sometimes we call folks out for things that we don't have context for, that we don't have a relationship with, that we just want to go viral as the person who called them out. And it doesn't always land the way we think it's landing, because we never thought through, what is my end goal here? Like, what do I actually want to see happen here? And so I would just, speaking to I statement, most of the times if I am calling somebody out, Facebook probably won't know, because I am probably picking up that phone, calling so and so, texting so and so. When I say so and so, I mean the person who actually is the culprit, not just gossiping about the girl. Did you see what so and so said? And usually, this is just Pastor Gabby. Usually, I'm not doing it in the moment, because I have experienced folks being defensive in the moment. At that point, their social capital is hanging by a thread. And often, if you do it publicly, they are only going to double down on their choices. And you have all of the other folks watching, trying to see how this is going to transpire. I have found that when the thing is over, then I'm like, hey, last month, what was up with that? I meant to ask you, what was going on with that? I had one very real situation where I have a lot of male friends who are preachers, and I was the only woman with them. We were headed somewhere. We were all like in a truck going together. And one of them brought up, like, one of these church moments that had gone viral. And they're all laughing in the car. And I'm not, because it's funny to me. And they're like, oh man, we done got Gabby upset now. I hadn't said a word, but the fact that I wasn't laughing while they were laughing, they felt my disposition being different in the car. And I was like, listen, since you asked, why were y'all there in the first place? Silence. What you mean? Why were y'all there in the first place? I said, because I knew this person had a reputation, but then I saw my brothers kicking it with this person. And then I had questions, and I felt betrayed by y'all, right? And that was my opportunity to say to them, like, yo, like, y'all told me not without our sisters. Y'all told me this is the way I move. So for me, my experience has been, calling folks out when their defenses are a little bit lower, for me, has been the time where we have been able to have those heart to hearts. Like, and they'll say to me, listen, if I would have cut off everybody that does blah, 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 there'd be nobody to stay. They have these different ways in which the conversation gets real. And to me, that's the turning point. That's the real, like, okay, we're really siblings in ministry now. Because now we're having the actual conversation. Now we're not having like the politically correct conversation. Now we're having the real, like, if I do this, somebody's going to blacklist me. If I do this, I'm going to cut off this amount of da 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 da. And then we get to have the real ethical conversations around, okay, but what is this stance worth to you? Right? Like, why are we all allowing, this one type of behavior to collectively keep us all quiet, and I think that that's where for me, that's where the tide has tended to turn, right? But I think everyone has a different gifting, because there are some folks who got that gift of in the moment, calling it out, making an intentional scene. It's like our the civil rights movements, right? Some folks do civil disobedience, some folks do the bail reform let out, some folks write the bills, some folks go behind closed doors, right? I think we need every tactic to get free. And I think women clergy need to be aware of our own tactics that are impactful, based on whatever gifts and whatever access we might have to some of the same people that we're trying to hold accountable.
I thank you. And we're going to continue to stay focused on the exploitation part of this conversation of the helper or the help meet within the church of, yes, you can read scripture yes, you may be able to pray maybe over the offering, but the real stuff has to be handled, by men, because we know better, we do better, God is closer to us. And of course, the two of you who are sitting on our digital couch right here, you have definitely spoken to, you've written about, you've preached about, you've led leadership conferences about, you speak in a beautiful foray of a variety of colors of ways to say it. We're qualified as well. We're not only qualified, but we can write another layer of books, and have conversations like a Jeremiah, right? I'm not going to name all the names, but that coming forward in such a way that, yes, people are recognizing. And of course, as we all know, there's a certain group of our brothers who are still sitting in spaces like, okay, but they're not going to walk into this room, whether it be denomination. And we won't step into that, but there are definitely some denominations that are still holding true to it's still the brotherhood, but the women can be the helpers. But the fact that two of you have spoken about, again, pulling someone's coattail, calling them week, month, or what have you later and say, so tell me about that. Or did you consider? Or how come? Or why isn't? And then waiting for that quote unquote pregnant pause of what their response is going to be. At least it continues to move that conversation forward. But then again, on conversations like this, we're letting all of our brethren and sisters know there are more women in the room who are going to name the thing, call the thing out, and then call you on your allyship. Are you really the ally? Are you really the helper? Are we really doing this for the greater good, or are we still doing it for, I want to say, the mail room, like the cigar room? You know what I mean? Like, are we still trying to just hold to a small group of people being in concert with that conversation? So thank you. We can move on to our final question, which is from survival to reformation. Okay, from survival to reformation. So both of you, and actually we're going to have another sister as well participate in this conversation. All of you have participated in many layers of women leading, promoting, directing, writing, orchestrating, conferencing, convening. And you all have either organized or been a part of the panels, a part of the deep conversations. Can we name some texts that you may use that you stand on in addition to the Bible that support your work as women leaders? Name a women's circle or a convening or conferences that exists now that help, of course, sustain you and empower the other women like you who are doing this work, but also continue to open the doors wider for the next generation of women leaders and women clergy, pastors, bishops, who are going to come alongside and behind you.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Gabby.
My honest answer is, typically when I prepare for these kinds of things, I don't necessarily prepare from a gendered perspective. I just prepare. So this question is a little bit hard for me, but I will say, there's a woman I met in New York just before the pandemic. Her name is Minda Harts. And she was a woman in corporate who began writing books to try to help Black women advance in their careers. And I think there's a lot of similarities and a lot of ways that we can draw from our corporate sisters who have made it to C-suite positions. I think that the assumptions that we fight and the glass ceilings that we break are very similar. So I would say to women listening who are willing to take an interdisciplinary approach, Minda Harts has a book called The Memo. She also has a book called We're More Than Magic. I think both of those books are really great. The Memo has actually been translated into a movie that Kyla Pratt is in that just was funded and released, I think, last summer. Another woman leader who writes on leadership, whose books I have been reading for the past 20 years is Carla Harris.
Mhm.
She has a follow-up book to that. I've forgotten the title, but really anything written by Carla Harris is really good, especially as it relates to negotiation, as it relates to making sure that you get what you deserve, and then some. There's also a coalition of three Black women writers who wrote a book about 20 years ago now called The Little Black Book of Success. Rhonda Joy McLean, Marcia Haygood, who unfortunately just passed away. Marcia just passed away, and a third writer, and they just released before her passing. They released the second iteration of that book, just little nuggets that women should have. And so those are, leadership books that I recommend. Also, I do a lot of work in strategy and innovation. There's a brilliant Black woman by the name of Linda Hill, Dr. Linda Hill at Harvard Business School. She writes on innovation and co-collaboration. Anything she writes, pick it up. So I would say those are resources that I use to empower myself. But honestly, when I'm leading in space, my gender is gonna come with me into the room regardless. But it's not necessarily a part of how I prepare. I will say when I'm looking for places to find other women clergy, the first place I was ever introduced to that did that was Dr. Cynthia Hale's Women in Ministry Conference. I try to go there with regularity, and I'm registered for Bishop's Conference next month. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you. I think Gabby's provided an excellent set of references. And to that, one of the texts that I've been going back to recently is one of the seminal works around Black women studies, and that's the book But Sorry. It's an anthology of essays, what we're then called Black feminists, and the full title is All the Women Are White, All Blacks Are Men. And it speaks to the particular space that Black women hold in this country, and reminds us that we are unseen in many spaces. We're not brave. We're not we're not out front. We just sort of get glossed over. So that's a text I returned to late last year and have been sitting with for the past few months. Of course, Carla Harris is like the queen of all the things, and just for spaces and texts that help you refine your thinking about ministry, how you see the holy text. Always Renita Weems, anything but Just a Sister Away. And also, I highly recommend for just to help reset your thinking some is Will Gaffney, Womanist what is the name? A Womanist Midrash. All kind of new interpretations that just make you go, "Ooh, I never thought about that before." Really? What was about Moses's wife? What happened now? Because Will Gaffney is a beast. So just those are things that I think about, and I think for Black women, the conference. I recommend Cynthia Hale's, Gina Stewart, Elaine Flake's Women in Men. Everybody's welcome at Power Rising, which is my conference by, for, and about Black. It's coming up soon in April in Chicago, and that's interdisciplinary. And this year we haven't even announced this. In a society that makes it its business to dismiss, to demean, to diminish us. And so we have to find spaces where we can be. and poured into, and help us to remember what we originally believed about ourselves. And so those kinds of spaces, you ought to find yourself a conference that fills you, that pushes you, that stretches you, to hear something different, that's going to be sharpened, to meet people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet, refine you and do even better at the work that God has called you to do, whatever that work is. So find your conference, find your space, find your circle, find somebody to follow that you can listen to. Get the books and all of that, but there's nothing like human interaction to really pour into your being, your soul, your work, your space, and to help move you to the place that God has called you.
I feel Greetings. Thank you for still being with us. That was, again, Bishop Leah Daughtry and Dr. Gabby Cudjoe Wilkes. Bishop Leah Daughtry of House of the Lord Church and Dr. Gabby Cudjoe Wilkes of Double Love Experience. And now we will hear from Reverend Tisha Dixon-Williams of First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton. Is about your calling versus your containment. So you were called by God, but often constrained by certain patriarchal views of the church. How have you navigated the tension between the pew and the pulpit, between divine calling and institutional limitation, without shrinking your voice?
So thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this platform. I answered that by saying I made a decision very early on when I started preaching that I was not going to defend my call. It was very clear to me it wasn't a conference call. So that was between me and God. God called me, and I felt like, and still to this day, that God would confirm me and that God would affirm me. And my job was to show up authentically and do what God had called me to do. And that if I did that, it would be God who would defend me, that there would really be nothing that I would have to say in order to defend myself. And that has worked very well for me in this space. I think I didn't want to be stressed. The call is stressful enough without thinking about, as you say, the containment and all that comes with that. So my goal was to always just focus on the call, focus on what God called you to do, and let God take care of the rest. And that's pretty much what I have done.
So let's think about the actual theme of this discussion, which is exclusion equals exploitation. Mm-hmm. That your gifts can be used in a part of the church, in one section of the aisles, but not necessarily in leadership, running not just the pulpit, but the actual church for you in this particular case. And what is your thought about looking at how the relegation of your role and responsibility can be, let's say, down the aisle, but not at the front? What are your thoughts about that?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's unfortunate, especially now in this day and age in 2026. I think it's terribly unfortunate that we're still dealing with this, that we even still have to have this conversation. I think my heart breaks that you even have to ask that question, right? It's just, it seems ridiculous to me that we're still having this conversation when there are women presidents, women prime ministers, women are running major corporations, running countries. You know what? If you can run a household, like, shout out to all women who are just running a household. Forget a church, forget anything else. If you're running a household, kudos and shout out to you. I think women are often underestimated because here's what I've found. We're told we're too emotional to hold on to these, to carry these roles or to carry out these responsibilities. I look at my emotional gifts as my superpower. I've never looked at them as a hindrance. They are a superpower. And I think that women who lead churches need that superpower. A lot of times I have found or seen that electing a woman to an office of pastor is a trauma response. What do I mean by that? A lot of churches feel as though they have been damaged so much by men, a woman can't do any worse. And so why not give it a shot? At least we're doing something different. It's what I've seen. It's also something that was said to me when I was elected. And I thought, wow, that's a trauma response. But I also thought, and the next thought was, a win is a win. It doesn't matter that that's their motive. It's my job to do my job and to change that and say, or to affirm it in the way that says, yeah, we made the right decision. And most churches who are without a pastor are hurting. Most churches who are without a pastor for an extended period of time, it's been like herding cats. You have ministries at odds with each other. Nobody knows where to go. They're desperately looking for direction. And so what they really need most when a new leader comes in is a lot of support and a lot of nurturing. And women do that very well, very well. And so what seems to be a hindrance actually becomes our superpower, because what we come in and do sometimes give everybody now we give a great big hug. We give instruction, we give direction, we bring order, we bring administration and all those things, but we also bring a level of emotional intelligence that's unparalleled. And that is usually what a church needs when they're dealing with a new pastor. There's a sensitivity that we have. One of the things that I did when I got to my church, I noticed how people would stop at the pastor's office door. It was interesting. If I asked someone to come to my office, it was this immediate feeling of, dun, 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 oh my gosh, I'm being called to the principal's office. And I would watch people just stop and stand at the door. And I was like,
what am I supposed to be doing?
Right. They're like, this is bad. This is bad if the pastor calls you in their office. And I'm like, now I don't come from that background. I come from a background where if the pastor called you in their office, it was a good thing. I remember sitting in my pastor's office in both churches, the church I grew up in and the church I ended up serving in. And I never had, thank God, a traumatic experience in my pastor's office. Right. And so for me, a pastor's office was a place of safety. And I know that's not everybody's story, but it was for me. And so imagine my surprise when people are coming to the door and they're reluctant to walk in. They're like, oh no, I can't go. Oh my God, I'm so in so much trouble. And to the point where people would actually say that, oh no, Pastor, why am I being called to the principal's office? Like, the principal's office? Sis, I just wanted to talk to you about the scripture reading this morning and that you did a great job. I wasn't like, I kind of just wanted to hug you, or I kind of wanted to say, I'm sorry, I can't make your baby's birthday party. It had nothing to do with anything that you did wrong. So in an effort to sort of kind of kill that, I redecorated my office. And I put a comfy couch in there and candles in there and pillows in there because I wanted people to feel safe. So it's like, maybe the decor will change it. And now people come in my office and they'll sit on that couch and I say, be careful with that couch because you'll end up in a nap. They'll grab a pillow, sit on it. So I tried to shift the paradigm a little bit so that people felt safe around their pastor. And I think those are things that women think about that maybe our brothers don't always think about. And that's okay. But I think we come with a set of, like Liam Neeson said, I have a special set of skills think we come to the table with a special set of skills that ought to be celebrated instead of looked at as our greatest weakness. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent, and actually brings it me to the next question about like the helper position of I can be on the periphery, like I can, and I'm totally not going to cheapen what you just said, but I can create that soft space for someone to fall. But in terms of doing a financial plan or a capital plan, right, for like to reconstruct or the building fund or investments, or negotiating with like the land preservation in order to make the church all that's for men, right? And so so how have you had to switch that paradigm, that narrative, by doing the work that you do? So yes, and you said like the softer skills of let me change the lighting in my office to hey, I can also do a 5 and a 10 year and a 15-year plan. Watch me work.
Sure. Right. Right. And I've had to do that, especially during COVID. And redecoration of our sanctuary. We did reconstruction of our sanctuary. We reconstructed our downstairs. We negotiated. This was after COVID. During COVID, I brokered a deal with Fresh Direct when people could not go to the grocery stores and they could not collect their groceries. I was referred by another woman pastor, and she said, "Do you think they could use your parking lot?" And we brokered a deal, and they used our parking lot during COVID to deliver groceries. In addition, we got a call. Another deal that we had was with a production company working with HBO on a major television show, and they used our parking lot to park their cars and their vehicles while they shot on location. And it went so well that they just recently called us back last year and said, "We're doing another show. Can we use your parking lot again?" Here's what's interesting about that. There were other places they could have gone, but it was because of the relationship that I had developed with them. Even last year, they were like, "We want to come back to you. We can go other places, but you guys were so kind to us. We want to come back to you." Another entity, that a dog rescue, spent 3 weeks in our parking lot this past, 1 week, in our parking lot this summer with rescue dogs. So things like that. I'm a creative thinker, creative out of the box. And what do we have at our disposal? One of our best resources really is our parking lot. It's open space, it's free space that really is mostly occupied on Sunday. So why not use it to create some revenue for the church? So it ended up being, our parking lot ended up being a revenue producing asset, and we didn't even know it. So things like that. Right now, we're about to embark on a capital campaign for our church. We implemented for our 100th anniversary. We're going to be 102 in May. For our 100th anniversary, in reading the church history, learning that our church was started with a $2,000 mortgage and a $1 down payment. And so what I did was, my sermon for that Sunday, I closed it with the idea of $1 and a dream. Do you remember that old New York lottery slogan? All you need is $1 and a dream.
Yes, I'm a part of that era.
Right. And so now that's what we have. We have our $1 and a dream campaign, because the folks who built our church and founded our church did not know what that $1 would brought. We are the beneficiaries of that. We are the manifestation of this $1 100 years later. They didn't know what was going to happen when they invested that $1. And so now we have a $1 and a dream campaign where we have a separate plate, a separate line item on Give a Five for $1 and a dream. And people give their dollars. And the idea is that we will be able at some point to either put a down payment on or build sustainable housing somewhere in the Long Island area for people who don't have homes. One of the things that breaks my heart the most is when we have people who are homeless or unhoused, let me say that, who sleep in our parking lot. And when I find out about it, the first thing I say is, "You're welcome here to stay here. We'll do our best to maybe provide you a few nights in a hotel as we can help you find housing. But how amazing would it be if the church had housing, for people who find themselves in hardship, and we can provide that. So I've done all of those things from the business side, and I brought that with me. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a business owner, 14 years in corporate America, working for the largest media company in the world. So I came with all of those things. I remember when I first came, and there was a funeral. I don't know why everybody decided to die when I came. It was crazy. They were like, okay, we got a pastor now. We can go. I did a lot of funerals when I first got there.
They were holding on. They were
holding on for a pastor, right? They were holding on for somebody to eulogize them. And so I remember I was in my office, and I actually created the program. And one of my mothers walked up. She saw me doing it, and she's like, "Finally, we got a pastor that can do something." She said, "A pastor that can do some stuff." So, because some of those things were outsourced, and she's like, "You did this?" I said, "Yeah, these are things I could do in my sleep." Finally, we got a pastor that could do some stuff. Now that was good and bad, because I didn't want to be pigeonholed into doing funeral programs. But I say that to say I came with more skills than just the ability to preach. I came with skills that can grow a business, grow an entity. I came with a corporate side, and that served me well. It's been great. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's chat about survival to reformation, from survival to reformation. So as women who have broken barriers and shifted narratives, what must continue to change structurally and spiritually so the next generation of women can lead without having to fight the same battles? You definitely had doors that were open for you. You're still working through how you are supporting women for the next generation. In this response, is there a text that you lean on, or that you can lean on for inspiration, a women's circle, a conference, mentor that has carried you across the aisles?
So many. There's a couple of things that come to mind. So when I was installed ambassador, Susan Johnson Cook gave me this advice, some of the best advice I've ever gotten. She said, never sacrifice your femininity. She said, because your femininity is directly attached to your divinity. And she's like, you don't have to sacrifice that. It's the God essence in you. That is who you are. And so you should always embrace that. That was phenomenal advice that she had given me. I think one of the pieces of advice I give to people, especially those that I mentor, is it's more important to be in the room than be on the program. I'm going to say it again. It's more important to be in the room than be on the program. If you can be in the room, learn what you can, glean what you can, connect with who you can, you will get on the program. It's about relationships. And I know most people are eager to, when am I going to preach? When am I going to do this? When am I going to do that? Be in the room. If there is a program that, a fellowship, a program, something that's happening, a talk, a lecture, a symposium, register. Avail yourself to these things. Be in the room. Because you'll start to see the same people. You'll start to meet. Well, didn't I see you? Wait, I saw you at Women in Ministry in Atlanta, didn't I? Or I saw you. Didn't I see you at IC3? And you begin to make these connections and friendships. And before you know it, you guys have a cohort and you have a group of friends. And it's more important to be in the room than it is to be on the program. If you can do that, doors will open for you. So I tell people that all the time. Your gifts will certainly make room for you. And that kind of goes back to the first question that you asked me. I was concentrating on my gifts. I was concentrating what God called me to do, and the doors open. That's just kind of how it worked. The last piece of information, which is probably the most important, authenticity wins every time. Show up as yourself every single time. There's only one of you. And I know that sounds cliche, but consider this. God didn't make another one of you. You're it. That's it. I tell people I love sometimes when I tell them to take care of this, I say, take care of yourself. You're the only you I got. Meaning there's no replacing you. You're irreplaceable. And sometimes we wonder why doors won't open for us or why opportunities won't come. And maybe it's because you're using somebody else's voice. That's not your door. That's not your outlet. If you show up as your authentic self, your door will open. And guess what? There's a lot of people behind that door that are waiting to hear you. You are the answer to someone's prayer. Someone has been waiting for a word that they may not get because you won't preach it, because you're too busy trying to be somebody else. Show up as you every single time. I say this all the time. You can never offend God by being your natural self. Now you'll offend a lot of folks, but you can never offend God by being your authentic self. And so you show up as you every single time. If you can't hoop, don't hoop, holla.
Right.
If you can't sing, don't sing, pray. Use what's the song say? You got to use what you got to get what you want, right? And our job is to use what God has given us to save souls and bring people to Christ. You can't do that being fake. You have to do that by being real and being genuine. Those are the things that I would say. And there are so many tremendous examples out here. All of the women that are on this platform, whom I love so much, Dr. Daughtry and Dr. Gabby, just beautiful, authentic souls who show up as themselves every single time. And isn't it nice in a world that's so unsure that when you hear certain voices, you know exactly what you're getting? So it's like, if I see, I'll use her as an example because she's my sister and I love her. If I see Dr. Gabby on a flyer, I feel confident saying, you need to go hear her.
Right.
Whatever this thing is she doing, you need to register for that, because I know you're going to get a solid word. You're going to be encouraged, right? You're going to get educated. You're going to get a powerhouse. You're going to get some of the dopest energy you've ever been around. Go see her. Now, if Dr. Gabby wasn't herself all the time, then that's say, I don't know. She's cool, but I don't know what you're going to get. I can set my watch by some of my sisters in ministry, majority of them. I feel so confident in them that I know, I feel confident in Dr. Fambi. I feel confident in Dr. Jen. I feel confident in Dr. Leah. I know what people are going to get, Dr. Kelly. I don't want to name names. There's so many of them and they're super dope and they all know who they are. But I feel confident in sending people their way because they're the same all the time. Mm-hmm. I can set my watch by Dr. Danielle Brown and the work she does in ministry. And in a world that's topsy-turvy, in a world we can turn on TV at any moment in time and not know what in the world is going on, it feels good to know that there are some women out there preaching, leading women who are doing the good work of God, that you can say, I feel comfortable sending somebody I love to you. And so be that person, strive to be that authentic person that someone can look at and say, yeah, I feel comfortable sending somebody to that church, or I feel comfortable referring one of my young preachers to you. That's what it is. And that's what it's going to take to answer your question for us to get to the next space. In a conversation with one of the pioneer women of preaching, she told us that she said, for us, it wasn't about having a seat at the table. There was no table for us. We had to create our own table. But you guys have tables, you have platforms, you have social media, you have online resources. My goal, honestly, is just to help somebody else the way they help me. It is a perfect timing. I was in a conversation today. Gentleman is doing a conference for young preachers. And he asked if I would spread the word and do all those things. He said, will you pray? He asked me for 3 things. He said, will you pray for the success of the conference? He said, would you spread the word? He said, and would you consider some sort of sponsorship. I said, I was on his Zoom call, and I put him out of his own Zoom room because I needed to talk to my assistant, because there was something I needed to do with him. And I didn't want to agree to something I couldn't do. So we talked it out, and he came back. I said, here's what I'd like to do. Yes, I will certainly pray. Yes, I'm going to spread the word. I'd like to sponsor 3 people to attend. I said, and I would also like to donate my time. And his face, he was like, what? I said, yeah. I said, I'm available. And if you would have me, I would love to be a part of the conference. No cost to you. I'd like to donate my time because I believe in what you're doing. And I really want to hear these young preachers preach, to be able to give them some feedback and some maybe some information on how they, because I'm sure they're already amazing, but anything that I can help them do. Again, they're in the room. These are people who register for this, who are making it a point to be in the room. So they don't know who they're going to meet. They don't know. I don't know who I'm going to meet. I can meet the successor of my church should the Lord say I'm leaving. You just don't know. And so he was so happy, and he couldn't believe that I did this. I have one condition though. I said, the 3 sponsorships, I need them to be women. Whoever you apply the scholarships to, I said, this is no disrespect to the brothers, but I'm trying to give one of the women a head start, a little push. Because sometimes we as women have outside influences that the men don't have. For example, sometimes babysitting is a hindrance to women coming to these things, because I can't afford for someone to watch my child. And so maybe, just maybe, if I get a scholarship, that $100 can go to childcare for that night. And that'll help me be in the room. Things like that. As he agreed, he was like, absolutely, absolutely. And so I think that's what it's going to take. It's going to take us using whatever influence we have. I don't have a whole lot of influence, but whatever I have, I will give so that people can be blessed and doors can open for them. And, as the song says, if I can help somebody along the way, then my living will not be in vain. And that's what I want. I want the next generation of all preachers, because we need it. We need it so bad. And if I can be a part of continuing the legacy, I'd be very happy. I'm honored to do that.
Excellent. You actually wrapped up question 1, 2, and 3 in the answer that you gave about, hey, I'll do this under these conditions. I'll pray, I'll sponsor, but I want to write, what was the other thing? Before you add on. No, before that. You said you'll pray, you'll sponsor.
And I'll donate my time.
Right. Oh, no, you'll spread the word.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right. But the actual, let's say the cherry on top is, but I also want to be a part of it. So this whole Exclusion Is Exploitation is about, how do you tactfully and gently with love? Because in my mind, you were like pulling his coattail or the bottom of his robe, the hem of his garment, and saying, excuse me, you want me to support? I want to participate.
Yeah. And
right, how do you call that out in the nice way? And then that's like what you did. You kind of like, okay,
and I think, that's a perspective. I didn't think of it that way. That wasn't my motive. My motive was, because he talked about how passionate he was about this. It was the passion that compelled me to say, I want to see him win. I want to see this thing be a success for him. And maybe, just maybe, it might help if I can be there, right? If I can, I don't know, help in some way, because he has the lineup is amazing. He don't need me. But it was my way of saying, I believe in the work that you're doing, and I think it's great. And I had the window so I could do it. I had the window so I could do it. Now, to your point, I think it may be another circumstance that could be the thing to do. Yeah. In another circumstance where he was just so genuine and passionate and excited about what he was doing. But maybe in another context, that is the right move. It's like, yeah, but I need to be a part of it too.
Because as I'm envisioning what you were describing, and you said, in essence, the look on his face changed.
And that he was excited. He was thrilled.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Yeah, he was like, really? I was like, yeah, sure. Because it sounds like a bunch. It sounds like great fun, actually. I was like, I'd love to hear this. And maybe, it's like, you never know. You might be getting a sneak peek on the next great one. You just don't know.
And that's what we're all here to do, is to support, women, be in all the spaces and places that God has brought them to. But sometimes people, sometimes men and women might say, I think this is probably this work right here is relegated to the brethren. This work over here outside of the pulpit is best suited for women. And if God can give the word to both genders, God can allow both genders to be able to participate in
without question. Hands down, without question.
And so that was our conversation. Exclusion is exploitation. Exclusion and exploitation in the church profoundly shapes both the worship practices and the global witness of women. Systemic sexism not only hinders women's full participation in church life, but it can also alter how women see themselves and how they are seen both within and beyond faith communities. There is an impact on worship, an impact on witness, and an impact on the world. But when churches and the leadership, when they embrace and recognize women's spiritual authority, the result is a more holistic, authentic, and credible faith witness. And such environments foster resilience, healing, and a compelling testimony of Christ's inclusive love. I want to thank you for staying with us. I want to thank you for joining in. Thank you to Reverend Dr. Angelita Clifton, who partnered in this conversation, and the support, of course, of our Executive Secretary Treasurer, Reverend Emmett L. Dunn, who pushed this theme forward of exclusion is exploitation. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you next month, the first Thursday in May, where we will continue this work with some new guests, some new topics, because we are here to serve, not just locally or nationally, but globally, on how gender-based violence and oppression impacts our witness in the world, and also supports the work that we do here on the ground within our churches. Peace and blessings. We thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in our next conversation.